Olivia stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the lace of her dress as she smoothed the fabric down over her curves. The soft white fabric was embroidered with delicate silver thread that caught the light just right, highlighting the subtle shimmer of her skin. She barely recognized the woman staring back at her, not because she had changed, but because for the first time in years she felt different. Her chest tightened, not from anxiety or uncertainty, but from something unfamiliar, a spark of hope. Today was her 29th birthday, and in a few short hours she would celebrate her first wedding anniversary with Thomas at the Grand Ballroom of the Regency Hotel in Manhattan. The phone buzzed on the vanity table, a soft chime pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a message from the event planner confirming the final details. Everything had been prepared to perfection, down to the last detail. The flowers, the menu, the band, they had all been chosen with care to make this night unforgettable. For Olivia, this anniversary was not just a celebration of their marriage, but a symbolic moment, a turning point where she would finally feel at peace, at least for a little while. But there was an underlying fear, an ache that she couldn't shake off. She hadn't told anyone about the gnawing feeling deep within her, that subtle discomfort that had been growing inside her for months. Was it the pressure of the anniversary, the weight of the expectations, or the secret doubts she had been keeping to herself? She couldn't quite place it. As she adjusted the delicate silver necklace her mother had given her years ago, she caught her reflection again. Her mother's smile seemed to shine back at her, the same smile Olivia had seen so often as a little girl. The memory was bittersweet. It had been 2 years since her mother's passing, and that loss still haunted her, shaping so much of the woman she had become. The necklace was the last piece of her mother's love and guidance, and tonight Olivia felt it closer to her than ever. Tonight should have been a joyful celebration, and yet there was an eerie stillness in the air. She had spent months planning this event, hoping it would rekindle the warmth that had been missing between her and Thomas. Their first year of marriage had been a whirlwind of romantic gestures and promises. Thomas had swept her off her feet, with his charisma, his devotion, and his ability to make her feel like the most important person in the world. But that first year had also been full of changes, and not all of them good. The man who had once been her loving, attentive husband had started to slip away. His late nights at work became routine, his distracted glances growing more frequent. There were days when he hardly spoke to her at all. Where their love had once been all-consuming, it was now barely a flicker. Olivia had tried to brush it off, telling herself it was just a rough patch. After all, what marriage didn't go through its ups and downs? But somewhere along the way, she had begun to doubt, to question whether the man she had married still existed. She knew the signs. She could feel the tension in his voice when he spoke, see the distance in his eyes. But she had promised herself she wouldn't give up. Not without one last fight. She took a deep breath and exhaled slowly, trying to release the tightness in her chest. She had planned this evening to perfection. She had invited their closest friends, their families, even business colleagues from Thomas's firm. There was no room for failure. This night would remind him of the life they had once dreamed of together. It would rekindle the passion. It had to. Olivia reached for the black velvet jewelry box sitting on the vanity and opened it, revealing the gleaming sapphire watch inside. It had been an extravagant purchase, one she had agonized over for weeks, but she had known it was the perfect gift for Thomas. She had overheard him admiring it months ago at a high-end boutique in Paris, his eyes lingering on the price tag before he had laughed it off. "It's just a watch," he had said, but she knew better. It was more than just a watch. It was a symbol of the life they had built, the one he had worked so hard to provide for them. But that watch had cost her more than money. It had cost her the last piece of her mother's legacy, the small plot of land in Georgia her mother had left her, a piece of land that held the memories of summers spent picnicking under the great willow tree. Her mother had always dreamed of building a home there, a retirement sanctuary. The land represented love, connection, and family. It was the one thing that had always anchored Olivia. Yet she had sold it. All for a watch that Thomas had never even truly desired. "I know you understand, Mama," Olivia whispered to the mirror, her fingers brushing against the silver necklace. "You always said love was worth any sacrifice." The words stung as they left her lips. Was that true? Was this sacrifice worth it? Would it truly bring back the man she had once loved so deeply? She pushed the thought aside and closed the ice box, tucking it into her clutch. Tonight she couldn't afford to think about the sacrifices. She couldn't afford to dwell on the land or the pain of losing it. She had to focus on the night ahead, on rekindling the spark. She had to believe this celebration would fix everything. As the doorbell rang, signaling the arrival of the car service, Olivia glanced one last time at the mirror. The woman staring back at her wasn't just someone's wife. She was someone who had fought for this marriage, who had sacrificed, who had loved with everything she had. And tonight she would remind Thomas of that, of everything they had built. She made her way to the door, the watch case tucked securely in her clutch, her heart racing with a mix of anticipation and fear. She had no idea how much her world was about to change. The Regency Hotel's grand ballroom was transformed under Olivia's careful direction. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow, creating a soft, inviting atmosphere. Tables draped in ivory, linens were adorned with the most elegant centerpieces of scarlet roses, and candles flickered, casting intimate pools of light. The string quartet played softly near the dance floor, where guests mingled during cocktail hour. Everything was perfect. But Olivia's gaze was fixed on the entrance, and the butterflies in her stomach were no longer from excitement. They were from a growing sense of dread. It had been 45 minutes since the event started, and Thomas had yet to arrive. She had heard nothing. No call, no text. It was unlike him. Her best friend Amara appeared at her side with 2 glasses of champagne, her face betraying a hint of concern. "The man of the hour still stuck at the office?" she asked, handing Olivia a glass. Olivia forced a smile. "He texted that he's wrapping up a meeting. He'll be here soon." But Amara wasn't convinced. "You've worked hard for this night. Liv, don't let his absence ruin it." Olivia nodded, but the doubt lingered. She had planned this celebration for months. Every detail had been thought out with love and care. This night was supposed to remind Thomas of what they had, of what they could still have. Yet as the minutes dragged on, the doubt crept in. What if he didn't show up? What if he had already decided? As the sound of a commotion by the entrance broke her thoughts, Olivia's heart skipped a beat. Thomas had arrived, but as she turned to see him, her relief quickly dissolved into something else, something cold. Thomas looked disheveled. His tie was crooked, his hair unkempt, and there was an unsettling unsteadiness to his steps. He scanned the room, and when his eyes found Olivia, he smiled. But it wasn't the smile she had grown accustomed to. It wasn't warm. It was different. "There she is," he called out, his voice slurred. "The birthday girl and the anniversary. Wife." Olivia's heart sank as he made his way toward her, his movements stiff and awkward. He planted a quick perfunctory kiss on her cheek, his breath reeking of expensive bourbon. "You made it," Olivia whispered, trying to keep her composure. She reached to adjust his tie, but he jerked away from her touch. "Of course I made it," he replied sharply. "Wouldn't miss my own anniversary party, would I?" The edge in his voice sent a chill down her spine, and she could feel the tension growing between them. This was not the reunion she had imagined. This was not the man she had hoped for. The man she had loved. Something was wrong. Something had changed, and Olivia had a sinking feeling she wasn't going to like where the night was headed. It was only just beginning, but tonight would change everything. Olivia stood frozen, staring at Thomas as he stumbled toward her. Her heart raced and a cold wave of unease washed over her. The man she had married, the one she had carefully built her dreams with, was no longer the same person. He was a stranger, distant, disheveled, and in that moment unrecognizable. The room seemed to blur around her, and she felt as though time had stopped, suspending her in a moment of helplessness. He was here finally, but not in the way she had imagined. The man she had waited for, the one who had promised to stand by her side through every challenge, had arrived late to their anniversary party, reeking of alcohol and irritation. His tie askew, his hair tangled, and his movements stiff and careless. The years of fond memories, the late-night talks, the sweet promises made under the stars, they felt like a distant dream, an illusion she had built herself. The silence between them grew thicker as he approached. Thomas, once a man who held her with tender love and passion, now looked at her as though she were an obligation, as if their shared history had been reduced to a mere inconvenience. His words, sharp and detached, echoed in her ears. "The birthday. Girl and the anniversary wife," he said loudly, drawing the attention of a few guests. His voice was thick, slurred with bourbon, but that wasn't what caught Olivia off guard. It was the tone, the casual cruelty, the lack of warmth. She wanted to speak, to ask him what was going on, but the words stuck in her throat. His gaze flickered over her, and for a brief moment she thought she saw something. Maybe it was regret. Maybe it was anger. But it disappeared quickly, replaced by something colder, something she couldn't quite grasp. He leaned in to kiss her cheek, but it felt like nothing more than a formality, a gesture performed out of duty, not affection. "You made it," Olivia whispered softly, trying to cover up the deep ache she felt in her chest. She reached for his tie, hoping to fix the disarray, hoping to do something, anything that would bridge the gap between them. But when her fingers brushed against his, he pulled away. "Of course I made it," he replied, his voice tinged with irritation. "Wouldn't miss my own anniversary party, would I?" There was something biting in his tone, something that made her freeze. It was as though she were standing on the edge of a cliff, and with each passing second, the distance between her and the man she once loved grew wider. Her fingers trembled as she let her hand fall to her side. The warmth she had so desperately clung to was slipping through her grasp like sand in the wind. "Everything's fine," she whispered to herself, trying to calm the storm inside her. She had prepared for this night for months. She had spent endless hours planning, decorating, and coordinating every detail, all in the hopes of rekindling their love. She had made sacrifices, put aside her own dreams, all to make their marriage work. She had believed that this night would change everything. But now, as she stood there in the grand ballroom, surrounded by their closest friends and family, the reality of the situation hit her like a brick wall. He wasn't here, not truly. He was distant, lost in his own world, and she was just there. A pawn in his game, perhaps. The thought made her stomach twist. She could feel the weight of his indifference pressing against her chest, suffocating her, as if the air around her had thickened, making it harder to breathe. It didn't help that his presence seemed to have affected the atmosphere of the entire room. The guests, who had been laughing and mingling, now seemed hesitant, uncertain. Olivia noticed the quick glances exchanged between them, the uncomfortable silences that followed her and Thomas's interaction. She tried to smile, to maintain the illusion that everything was fine, but it felt hollow, fake. The years of building, a life with him, of sharing moments of joy and sorrow, now felt like a fragile house of cards, trembling and about to collapse under the slightest breeze. "Everyone's here," she said, trying to break the tension. She spoke with an upbeat tone, but her words felt empty in her own ears. "Your partners from the firm, my design clients, even your mother made it in from Boston." She forced herself to look at him, her eyes searching for any sign that he was still the man she had married. But there was nothing. No warmth, no familiarity. "Wonderful," Thomas said flatly, not looking at her. He grabbed a champagne flute from a passing server and downed it in one go. "Shall we begin the festivities? Isn't there some kind of program for the evening?" Olivia's heart sank. It was as though he was asking her to perform, to put on a show for their guests, to act as though everything was okay, when she knew deep down that it wasn't. She could feel the walls closing in around her, and the pit in her stomach grew deeper. He didn't care. He didn't even want to be here. "Happy anniversary," she said quietly, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She motioned toward the stage where the string quartet had paused, waiting for her and Thomas to speak to their guests. This was supposed to be their moment, something personal, something heartfelt. But instead she felt as though she was standing on the edge of a precipice, looking down into the abyss. But before she could take another step toward the stage, Thomas was already striding in that direction, signaling to the quartet to stop. The guests, who had been chatting among themselves, grew silent as they turned their attention to him. Olivia stood frozen, a cold shiver running down her spine. This wasn't part of the plan. Thomas tapped the microphone twice, his eyes scanning the room, and then he began. "Good evening, everyone," he said, his voice booming through the ballroom. "Thank you all for coming to this elaborate celebration." He waved his hand dismissively at the decorations, the flowers, the carefully curated details Olivia had spent months perfecting. His eyes swept over the room, and for a moment Olivia felt as though he was looking right through her. "My wife," he continued, his voice dropping in tone, "went to extraordinary lengths to mark our first anniversary." Olivia's heart stuttered in her chest. He emphasized the word extraordinary in a way that made it sound like an accusation, a criticism. Her breath caught in her throat and her hands went clammy. She took a step toward him, her mind racing, desperate to understand what he was doing. "Julian," she whispered, her voice trembling, but he didn't hear her. Or maybe he didn't care. Thomas went on, his words growing colder with each passing sentence. "You see, Olivia," he said, his gaze now shifting to her. "Our marriage has been a mistake from the beginning. A business arrangement that has outlived its usefulness." Her world tilted. The floor beneath her felt as if it was being pulled away. She couldn't breathe. The words were a punch to her gut, knocking the wind from her. He had said it. He had said what she had been dreading. The marriage, the love she thought they had built together, it had all been a lie. "Wait. What are you saying?" Olivia whispered, taking a step forward, but Thomas ignored her. He was speaking to the crowd now, his voice gaining strength. "I married Olivia because she had connections in the design world that benefited my investment portfolio," he continued, his eyes cold. "She married me because she thought I could give her the status and security she so desperately craves." Her stomach churned and her vision blurred with tears, but she refused to let them fall. She wouldn't cry in front of these people. Not like this. Not after everything she had sacrificed. Not after everything she had hoped for tonight. "And now," Thomas went on, his gaze never leaving hers, "I've come to realize that no amount of expensive parties or desperate attempts to impress me can make this charade worth continuing." He pulled something from his jacket pocket, a thick envelope, and without a second glance at Olivia, he thrust it toward her. "Divorce papers, Olivia. Consider yourself served." The envelope dropped to the stage, landing with a heavy thud that seemed to echo through the ballroom. Olivia stood there, unable to move. The world around her became a blur of noise and confusion as whispers erupted from the crowd. A sob threatened to break free, but she fought it back with everything she had. She wouldn't let him see her fall apart. "Did you really think her watch would fix everything?" Thomas sneered, his voice now low but full of disdain. "Did you think I wouldn't find out about you selling that land your mother left you?" The words hit her like a slap in the face. He knew. He knew about the land, about her sacrifice, and he was using it against her, twisting it into something that was her fault. The pain in her chest was unbearable. Her mother's land, the tree where her mother's ashes had been scattered, the last piece of her mother's memory. It was all being ripped away from her again. But this time, it wasn't just the land. It was everything. The love, the trust, the years they had spent together. Thomas turned, his back to her now, and headed toward the exit, his footsteps echoing through the room. "Enjoy the dinner," he called over his shoulder. "It's her parting gift to us all." The sound of his retreating footsteps was the only thing she could hear as she stood frozen in place. She wasn't sure how long she stood there, but when she finally found her voice, it was barely a whisper. "I gave everything for you," she said, her chest tight with emotion. "And this is how you repay me?" But there was no answer. Just the sound of the crowd moving, murmuring, some offering pitying glances. She didn't care about them. She didn't care about anything anymore. All she could hear, all she could feel, was the heavy weight of that envelope lying on the stage, a cruel reminder of everything she had lost. Olivia stood motionless, her mind racing, but her body refusing to respond. Her hands trembled at her sides as the tears she had fought so hard to hold back began to rise like a flood, threatening to break through. The weight of Thomas's betrayal was heavier than any burden she had ever felt. It was as if he had taken the last shred of her dignity and tossed it aside without a second thought, and now she stood in front of a room full of guests. The woman he had promised to love, reduced to nothing but a faint echo of what she had once been. Her thoughts were clouded by disbelief, by the surrealness of the moment. A year ago they had stood in this very ballroom, laughing and dancing, exchanging promises of a love that would withstand anything. A year ago they had celebrated their first wedding anniversary, convinced that their bond was unbreakable. But now everything had shattered in an instant. How had they gone from that joyous celebration to this? How had her husband, her partner, her confidant become this man? The man who was so quick to discard her, so eager to humiliate her in front of their friends, to reduce their marriage to a business transaction. The words Thomas had said echoed in her mind, over and over again. A business arrangement that has outlived its usefulness. She had built her life around him, around them. She had spent years loving him, sacrificing for him, even giving up her most precious memory, the land her mother had left her, just to buy him the extravagant gift he had admired. And in return, he had tossed it all aside like it meant nothing, like she meant nothing. Olivia turned slowly, her breath catching in her throat. The party had dissolved into murmurs and whispers, but it all felt distant. The words people exchanged, the glances they shared, none of it mattered. She couldn't focus on any of it. All she could think about was the man who had destroyed her. Trust in the cruelest way possible, a man she thought she knew better than anyone else. The feeling of the divorce papers lying on the floor beneath her still haunted her. How easily he had tossed them aside, as if her entire existence was something he could dismiss without a second thought. It wasn't just the dissolution of a marriage, it was the destruction of everything she had ever believed in. But as Olivia stood there, her world crumbling around her, she felt a sharp pang of something else. It wasn't just heartbreak, it wasn't just humiliation. There was anger at herself for ever thinking she could change him, anger at him for his callousness, and anger at the world for allowing her to be so vulnerable, so exposed. And yet, amidst the searing pain, there was a strange, uncomfortable feeling that began to creep into her chest, a feeling of liberation. As twisted and irrational as it was, she felt as though something inside her was finally waking up. Something was telling her that there was still life beyond this moment, that perhaps she wasn't completely lost. Maybe, just maybe, she had the strength to rebuild. For the first time, Olivia raised her head, her eyes searching the room. The crowd had gathered in small groups, their faces showing varying degrees of concern and discomfort. The man who had once been the love of her life had walked out without a second glance, leaving her to face the fallout alone. But she wasn't truly alone, was she? Her gaze settled on Amara, her best friend, standing near the entrance, watching her with an expression that was equal parts sympathy and fierce determination. Amara was the one person in this world who had always been there for Olivia, through thick and thin. The one person who had never doubted her, never questioned her worth. Without a word, Amara began walking toward her, pushing through the crowd, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. Olivia's chest tightened as she saw the look in her eyes. Amara was angry. No, more than angry, she was livid, and rightfully so. Thomas's cruelty had not only shattered Olivia's heart, it had also shattered the support system that had been built over years of friendship. Amara reached her side and wrapped her arms around Olivia, pulling her into a tight embrace. "Olivia, you don't have to go through this alone," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Olivia closed her eyes, leaning into her friend's comforting touch. The tears she had been holding back finally broke free, spilling down her cheeks in hot, uncontrollable streams. "I gave everything for him, Amara," Olivia whispered, her voice breaking. "I gave him everything, and he just threw it away. Just like that. After all these years, after everything I've done for him, he doesn't even care." Amara stroked her hair, her voice gentle but fierce. "You did what you thought was best for both of you, Olivia. You loved him with everything you had. But love doesn't work like that. You can't give someone everything and expect them to treat you like you're not replaceable." Olivia nodded, her chest tight with the sting of truth. "I thought we were building a life together," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I thought we were meant to be." "You're meant to be," Amara said softly, pulling back slightly to look into Olivia's eyes. "Just not with him. You're stronger than you know, Liv. You will get through this. And one day you'll look back and realize that this was the moment when you stopped letting someone else define your worth." Olivia took a shaky breath, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt a small flicker of hope. She was hurt, deeply hurt, but maybe this pain was the beginning of something else, something better. As Amara led her away from the stage, away from the scene of Thomas's humiliating departure, Olivia allowed herself a moment to breathe. The air felt different now. He had taken everything he could from her trust, her security, her heart, but he couldn't take away her strength. He couldn't take away the woman she had become. The party was still ongoing, but Olivia no longer felt the need to participate. Her focus had shifted. She was no longer trying to win him back. She was no longer waiting for a man who didn't see her value. "Thank you," Olivia said quietly to Amara, her voice still shaky but more composed. "For being here. For not letting me fall apart." Amara squeezed her hand. "Always. I'm not going anywhere." As they stood together in the corner of the room, watching the guests who seemed to be pretending that nothing had happened, Olivia felt a shift in herself. For the first time, she saw the reality of her situation without the rose-colored glasses she had worn for so long. This wasn't the end of her story. It was a turning point. Yes, it hurt. Yes, she was devastated. But as the tears slowly faded, A fierce determination began to replace the pain. This night, this heartbreak would not be her undoing. She would rebuild. She would rise. And one day she would find someone who saw her for who she truly was, not for what she could give them, but for what she could be to them. As the night went on, Olivia took a step back. She looked around the room, her eyes now clear, her heart slowly starting to heal. She knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time she was ready to walk it. She was stronger than she had ever known, and she would never let anyone make her feel less than what she was again. This was just the beginning, and no matter what came next, she would face it with her head held high, because in the end no one could break her except herself. And she was done breaking. Olivia stood at the balcony of her apartment, staring out into the sprawling city lights that flickered beneath the darkened sky. The night had taken a different turn than she had ever imagined, and yet, in the silence of her solitude, there was a sense of calm. The echoes of her past were still fresh, the sting of betrayal searing her heart, but there was something else, something that had shifted in her, something that made her believe that even though her world had been shattered, it wasn't the end. She had never expected to find herself in this position, not in a million years. A year ago, her life had been different. A year ago, she had been standing next to Thomas at their anniversary celebration, the world at their feet, surrounded by friends and family, basking in the glow of what she had believed was true love. But now, everything was broken, splintered into pieces too small to mend, and she had been left with nothing but the harsh truth that she had been wrong about everything. Her marriage, her dreams, the future she had so carefully built with him. None of it mattered now. The wind swept through her hair, pulling her out of her thoughts for a moment. She closed her eyes and breathed in deeply, feeling the coolness of the night air against her skin. She needed to let it go. She needed to move on, to step forward into a new chapter. The bitterness, the anger, the sadness, they were like a weight tied to her heart, and if she didn't release them, they would continue to drag her down. But just as she was about to let go of her past, she heard a soft knock on her door, a knock that was so familiar, so gentle, it made her pulse race. "Amara, live you okay?" Amara's voice echoed through the door. Olivia turned toward the door, surprised that she had not heard her friend's footsteps coming up the stairs. She quickly wiped the tears that had begun to fall and opened the door, meeting Amara's concerned gaze. "I'm fine," Olivia said, forcing a smile as she tried to regain some semblance of composure. Amara stepped inside, her eyes scanning Olivia's face with a knowing look. She knew the walls Olivia had built to protect herself, knew how fiercely her friend had loved Thomas, and knew the depths of the pain she was hiding. But even Amara couldn't fully understand what this had done to Olivia. The humiliation, the betrayal. It wasn't just the end of her marriage. It felt like the end of a piece of herself that she had given away willingly. The one thing she had once believed would never be taken from her. Her belief in love had been shattered. Amara stood in front of her, arms crossed, her expression shifting from concern to determination. "Olivia, this is not the end of your story," she said firmly, her voice unwavering. "You are not going to let him win. Not like this." Olivia shook her head, her voice weak. "I don't know how to move on, Amara. It feels like everything I've worked for, everything I've given was for nothing. And now I'm just here, alone." Amara stepped closer, placing a hand on her friend's shoulder. "You are not alone. And you don't have to figure this out on your own. You're stronger than you know, Liv. You've got me, and we're going to get through this together." Olivia swallowed the lump in her throat and nodded. The comfort of her best friend's presence was the only thing keeping her from falling apart completely. But as much as Amara's words soothed her, Olivia knew she had to find a way to heal on her own. She couldn't keep relying on the people around her to fix the pieces of her broken heart. This was her journey, her healing process, and for the first time in months she felt a flicker of hope that perhaps she could do it. As Amara continued to speak, her voice soft yet powerful, Olivia felt her heart begin to soften. She didn't want to let Thomas win. She didn't want to allow his cruelty to take away everything she had worked so hard for. No matter how deep the wound, no matter how broken she felt, she knew she had to find her strength again. The next few days were a blur of emotions, a whirlwind of mixed feelings that collided within her. On the outside, she carried on with the motions of her life. She went to work, met with clients, even smiled through the small talk and pleasantries. But on the inside, Olivia was still reeling. The betrayal was like a fresh wound that had just started to heal, only to be reopened every time she thought of Thomas and the life they had shared. It felt impossible to erase the memory of his cold words, the way he had discarded her in front of everyone, the way he had turned their love into something cheap, something transactional. But as she continued with her daily routine, she found herself drawn to one thought, one question that kept nagging at the back of her mind. What now? What would her life look like after this? One evening, as she sat alone in her apartment, nursing a glass of wine and flipping through a design magazine, her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. She hesitated for a moment, unsure whether she should even look at it. But curiosity got the better of her, and she unlocked her phone. The message read, "The Metropolitan Museum is hosting a charity gala for arts education tomorrow night. Your name was on the guest list from your work with their design committee last year. I hope you'll attend. The world deserves to see your light, even when you feel most in shadow." It was from Marcus Thornton. She had met him briefly at an event a few months ago, where they had exchanged pleasantries and talked about their shared love for design. He was charming, intelligent, and driven. Everything that Thomas had never been. And for some reason, the idea of attending the gala, of being around someone who truly appreciated her work, sparked something inside her. A tiny ember of hope. She quickly typed a response. "Thank you, Marcus. I'll be there." The following evening, Olivia found herself at the gala, her nerves barely contained beneath the elegant gown she had chosen. She had always been a confident woman, but tonight, as she entered the grand hall filled with well-dressed elites and powerful figures from the art and business worlds, she felt vulnerable in ways she hadn't anticipated. Her life had just been torn apart. And yet here she was, surrounded by the very people who had once celebrated her and Thomas's perfect marriage. As she stood near the entrance, taking in the atmosphere of the evening, her eyes met Marcus's across the room. He was dressed impeccably in a tailored tuxedo, his presence commanding yet approachable. There was something about him, something that made Olivia feel seen, not for the facade she had been forced to wear, but for the woman she truly was. He walked toward her with a warm smile, his hazel eyes locking with hers as if they had known each other for years. "I'm glad you could make it," he said, his voice deep and reassuring. Olivia returned his smile, surprised by how easily his presence put her at ease. "Thank you for inviting me," she replied softly. They stood there for a moment, the noise of the crowd around them fading as they shared a quiet connection in the midst of the celebration. For the first time in what felt like forever, Olivia didn't feel like a victim of her circumstances. She felt like herself again, like the woman who had once dreamed of a bright future before her world was torn apart. As the night continued, Marcus and Olivia found themselves deep in conversation about their shared interests in design, architecture, and the importance of beauty in creating spaces that mattered. There was a chemistry between them that neither could deny, a spark that felt different from anything Olivia had ever felt with Thomas. It was something pure, something untainted by expectations or obligations. It was a connection that was built on mutual respect and admiration, not on the false promises of love that had once bound her to a man who didn't value her. The evening wore on, and as the gala began to wind down, Marcus invited Olivia for a walk through the museum's rooftop garden. The cool night air was refreshing, and as they strolled under the stars, Olivia found herself opening up in ways she hadn't done in years. She shared her frustrations, her fears, and the pain that had been lingering in her heart since the fateful night of her anniversary. But through it all, Marcus listened, never interrupting, never judging. He simply held space for her, allowing her to release the burden she had been carrying. "You're an extraordinary woman, Olivia," he said quietly, his voice soft but filled with sincerity. "And anyone who doesn't see that doesn't deserve to be in your life." His words, simple yet profound, struck a chord deep within her. For the first time in a long while, Olivia felt like she was worthy of more than the scraps that Thomas had thrown her way. She was worthy of love, of respect, and of a future that was hers to shape. As they reached the edge of the garden, Marcus turned to her, his expression serious but gentle. "Olivia," he began, "I know this may be unexpected, but I've spent the past few months thinking about you, about your work, your strength, and the way you carry yourself, even in the face of everything you've been through. I want to be someone who supports you, who values you for who you are, not just for what you do." Olivia's heart raced as she looked into his eyes. She had felt this connection growing between them all night, but hearing him say it out loud made her stomach flutter with anticipation. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What are you saying?" He took a deep breath, stepping closer to her. "I'm saying that I would like to get to know you better. I would like the chance to show you that not all men are like the one who hurt you. I would like to court you, Olivia, properly, to take things slow and see where this goes." Olivia stood there, her breath catching in her throat. It wasn't an offer of marriage, not yet, but it was something more, something real. It was the chance to start over, to trust again, and to believe that love could be more than a game of deceit and manipulation. And for the first time since Thomas had walked out of her life, Olivia felt a flicker of hope. Olivia had never imagined that the remnants of her broken heart would lead her here, to a place so far removed from the life she had once known. After everything she had endured, after the painful journey of picking up the shattered pieces of herself and trying to make sense of the chaos that had been her marriage, she was standing at the precipice of something new, something that felt so different yet so strangely familiar. She sat alone in her small studio apartment, a room filled with memories of better days, and with designs scattered around her work table, her mind was a tangled mess of emotions. It had been 2 months since the night at the gala, the night Marcus had proposed to her, offering not just a future together, but a healing of sorts. He had asked for her to trust him, to allow him the chance to prove that not all men were like Thomas. And for the first time since the collapse of her marriage, Olivia had allowed herself to entertain the idea of love again. But it was complicated. She didn't have to be told that. Her mind was still stuck in the past, tethered to memories of betrayal, of promises unkept. Every time she thought she could move on, every time she let herself entertain the notion of opening her heart again, something pulled her back. It was as though she were caught between two worlds, one that had already fallen apart, and one that promised to rebuild her. But the weight of her previous hurt held her down, and the ghosts of her marriage with Thomas lingered, casting long shadows over anything that even remotely resembled affection or love. The pain she had carried for so long was still raw. She hadn't yet fully let go of Thomas. No matter how much she tried to remind herself that he was no longer her reality, her heart still struggled with the unanswered questions and the wounds that had not fully healed. Could she trust again? Could she allow someone else in, knowing the possibility of them disappointing her, of them betraying her like he had? Olivia sighed, her gaze falling on the watch that sat on her nightstand. It was the same one she had bought with the land her mother had left her, the land she had sold for Thomas. The watch had been meant to be a symbol of her sacrifice, a is-I gift that spoke to the love she had believed she shared with him. It had been a naive hope, a foolish belief that love could conquer all, but it hadn't. Instead, that watch had become a constant reminder of what she had lost, what she had given away so carelessly, thinking it would secure a future for her and the man she loved. The familiar weight of her mother's absence was still with her, lingering in the quiet moments of the day. Her mother's death had left a hole in her heart, a place that could never be filled, but she had hoped, foolishly perhaps, that Thomas would help her bridge that gap, that he would be the one who would make her feel whole again. Instead, he had left her broken, betrayed, and alone on the night of their anniversary, surrounded by a room full of people who had witnessed her pain. Enough, she whispered to herself, her voice trembling. She had been through enough. The tears had dried, the sorrow had subsided, and now it was time to move forward. She had to. She couldn't let the past control her future. Not anymore. As if on cue, her phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. "I know it's been a while, but I was thinking of you. Are you free for dinner tonight?" The message, so simple yet so profound, made her heart race. She had known Marcus for just a few months, and yet it felt like he had known her forever. He had shown her kindness when she had least expected it, had offered a hand when she thought there was no one left to trust. He wasn't like Thomas. He didn't have that cold, calculating nature that had sucked the life out of her marriage. Marcus was different. His sincerity, his respect for her had slowly begun to chip away at the walls she had erected around her heart. But could she take that step? Could she trust him? Could she allow herself to believe that this, whatever this was not just a fleeting moment, a distraction from her pain? Or was it the beginning of something real? Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she typed a response, her thoughts racing. "I'd love that. I could use a good meal. Let's meet at 7? She pressed send, the weight on her chest lifting just a little. She had agreed. She was allowing herself to hope again. For a moment, she allowed herself to smile. It felt strange but freeing. When Olivia arrived at the small Italian bistro where they had agreed to meet, The soft glow of candlelight illuminated the cozy, intimate space. The sound of light conversation and the soft clink of glasses filled the air, but Olivia barely noticed. All she could focus on was Marcus, standing by the entrance, waiting for her with a smile that sent a flutter through her stomach. It had been a while since she had felt this way about someone, this mixture of curiosity and nervous excitement. He looked handsome as always, his dark hair perfectly tousled, his sharp features softened by the warmth in his eyes. He was nothing like Thomas. He didn't wear the mask of arrogance that Thomas had, nor did he treat her like a pawn in a game of status. With Marcus, there was no pretension, no manipulation, just honesty, just sincerity. "Olivia," he said warmly, his voice a low murmur, a familiarity, as if their connection had long since been established. "It's good to see you," she smiled, her heart beating faster than she expected. "It's good to be seen." As they sat down and the waiter poured their wine, Olivia found herself talking easily with Marcus, laughing at the silly things that happened during her workday, sharing stories of her childhood, and even joking about her over-the-top design ideas. It felt natural, the way she had always imagined it should feel with someone she cared about. There was no pressure, no expectation, just two people sharing a moment. But as the evening wore on, something shifted. Olivia felt it in the air between them, an unspoken tension, a quiet understanding that this was not just a casual dinner between two friends. This was something more. Marcus had always respected her space, always made her feel like an equal. But tonight there was something different in the way he looked at her, something deeper in the way he listened to her words. She had heard him say the words before, that he wanted to court her, to show her that he was worthy of her love. But now, in the dim light of the bistro, she could feel the sincerity in his gaze, in every gesture he made. She could feel that he wasn't just interested in her for the sake of having her. He genuinely cared for her. He respected her. And most of all, he understood her. As the evening came to a close, Marcus took her hand in his thumb brushing over the back of her fingers, sending a warmth through her that she hadn't felt in a long time. "Olivia," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "I know this is soon and I don't want to rush you, but I want you to know that I care for you, more than I've cared for anyone in a long time. You're not just someone I want to date. You're someone I want to build a life with. You've been through so much, and I want to show you that there's more out there for you. I want to be the man who proves that you can trust again. That love can be real, not like it was before." Her heart skipped a beat. This wasn't a proposal, not yet, but it was something more powerful. It was a promise. "I don't know if I'm ready for all of this," Olivia said, her voice barely a whisper. "I've been hurt so badly, Marcus. I don't know if I can go through that again." Marcus's expression softened, his eyes filled with understanding. "You don't have to be ready. I'm not asking you to rush. I'm asking you to give me a chance to show you. I'll wait as long as it takes." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. She had never heard someone speak with such sincerity, such understanding. And for the first time in months, she realized that maybe, just maybe, there was hope for her. There was hope for a future that didn't include the pain of the past. And in that moment, under the soft glow of the bistro lights, Olivia made a choice. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if she could ever fully trust again. But she knew that with Marcus she was willing to try, to open her heart, to take the first step toward healing, toward a new beginning. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'll give you a chance." Marcus's face lit up with a smile that made Olivia's heart swell. She didn't know what this would lead to, but for the first time in a long time, she was no longer afraid. She had found someone who saw her for who she truly was, someone who wasn't trying to fix her but to walk with her as she healed. It was a small step, but it was a step towards something real, something she had once thought impossible. And that was all she needed for now. The weeks following that dinner with Marcus had been a whirlwind for Olivia. She had never imagined that the decision to let herself feel again would lead to such a profound shift in her life. For so long she had lived in the shadows of her past, haunted by memories of a love that had turned into betrayal. She had told herself that she would never trust again, never give anyone the power to hurt her the way Thomas had. But Marcus was different. His understanding, his patience, the way he respected her scars instead of rushing to heal them, it was everything she hadn't known she needed. As she walked into her studio on a brisk morning, the light streaming through the windows fell upon the sketches scattered across her desk. Each design, each drawing carried a piece of her, a piece that had been lost in the turmoil of the past. She hadn't been able to focus fully on her work for a while, but now something had shifted within her. The walls she had so carefully built around her heart were starting to crack, and in their place, a flicker of hope had begun to grow. She took a deep breath and settled into her chair, looking at the designs before her. There was a sense of clarity now, a focus she had been missing. Her mind, which had once been clouded by doubt, was now sharp, filled with possibilities. It was as if the act of opening her heart to Marcus had freed her in ways she hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just about him, about the promise he had made to her. It was about reclaiming herself, finding the woman she had lost in the wake of her failed marriage. Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence of the room. The message was from Marcus, as it often was. "I've been thinking a lot about you lately. How's everything going with the designs? I was hoping we could talk tonight. I have something important to ask you." Her heart skipped a beat. She had gotten used to Marcus's thoughtful messages, the way he checked in on her, always making sure she felt valued, never pressuring her. But this message, this simple line about him having something important to ask, sent a wave of curiosity and anticipation rushing through her. She had been in the midst of wondering what the future held for them, if they were ready to take the next step. But to her surprise, her own thoughts on the matter had shifted. She wasn't as afraid anymore. Olivia hadn't realized how much she had been avoiding the question of love, of truly allowing herself to be loved, until Marcus had come into her life. She had tried so hard to shield herself, to bury the pain of the past, but in doing so, she had closed herself off from the very thing she had longed for. Now, standing at the crossroads of a future she never thought possible, she felt a new kind of strength. It wasn't about forgetting the pain. It wasn't about pretending that the past hadn't shaped her. It was about learning how to live with it, to grow from it, and to allow someone in who could hold her heart with the respect it deserved. As the hours ticked by, Olivia found herself thinking about the dinner with Marcus more and more. He had been so gentle with her, so understanding of the space she needed, and yet in the quiet moments she could feel his presence, a constant reminder that someone saw her, truly saw her, not for what she could provide, not for the work she did, but for who she was beneath it all. The woman who had loved too fiercely, who had sacrificed too much, but who still had the capacity to trust again. By the time the sun began to dip low in the sky, casting a soft golden glow over the city, Olivia's nerves had settled. She had spent the afternoon sketching new designs for a local community center project, and for the first time in months, the work felt like an extension of herself. It wasn't just about creating beautiful spaces. It was about creating spaces that allowed people to heal, to grow. That, she realized, was what Marcus had done for her. He had given her the space to heal, and in doing so, had helped her rediscover the part of herself that had been buried under layers of hurt. That evening, Marcus picked her up for dinner, as they had agreed. The drive was quiet but not awkward. There was something peaceful in the air, as if the world had momentarily paused, allowing them to just exist in the same space. They arrived at a quaint little Italian restaurant near the river, one they had visited a few times before. The soft hum of the city outside was muffled by the cozy ambience inside, and as Marcus led her to their table, she couldn't help but smile. There was a warmth in his presence, a steadiness that she had never known. As they settled into their seats, the familiar waiter greeted them with a warm smile, and they ordered their usual, an appetizer of bruschetta followed by a simple pasta dish. The conversation started with the usual banter, casual talk about their days, but as the meal progressed, the air between them grew heavier. There was an unspoken understanding that something more was coming, something that would define the next chapter of their lives. Olivia found herself lost in Marcus's eyes, his gaze intense yet kind, as if he was searching for something in her, trying to understand the quiet places in her heart that even she hadn't fully explored. She had never been one to wear her emotions on her sleeve, but with him it was different. There was no need to pretend. He saw her, the real her. As they finished their meal and the waiter cleared the plates, Marcus leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving hers. "Olivia," he began, his voice soft but full of intent. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about the future. I know we've only just begun this journey together, but I can't help but feel that what we have is something special. And I want to ask you to take a chance on me, to take a chance on us." Her heart skipped a beat, the weight of his words sinking in. She had suspected that this conversation was coming, but to hear it spoken aloud, to hear the sincerity in his voice, it hit her in a way she hadn't expected. She wasn't sure if she was ready for all of this. She wasn't sure if she could trust again. But looking at him, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes, she knew one thing, for sure. He wasn't asking her to forget the past. He was asking her to build a future. "I want to build something real with you, Olivia," Marcus continued, his voice steady. "I know you've been hurt. I know you've had to fight for everything in your life. But I want to be the one who stands beside you, not just when it's easy, but when it's hard too. I want to be the one you can rely on. I want to prove to you that not all men are like Thomas." The mention of Thomas brought a sharp pain to her chest, but she swallowed it down. This wasn't about him. This was about her, about what she needed, what she deserved. Marcus reached across the table, taking her hand gently in his. "I know I'm asking for a lot. I know this isn't easy, but I can't imagine my life without you in it. You've become more than just someone I care about. You've become the one person I want to build my future with. And I'm willing to wait for you, for as long as it takes. But I need to know if you're willing to take that step with me." Olivia's mind raced. There were 1,000 reasons to say no, 1,000 doubts she could list. But as she looked at Marcus, as she felt the sincerity in his touch, something in her began to shift. For the first time in a long time, she felt ready to move forward. Not because she had forgotten the past, but because she had learned to live with it. The scars didn't define her anymore. They were part of her story, but they didn't have to dictate her future. She squeezed his hand, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm willing to take the step. I'm willing to take a chance." A smile spread across Marcus's face, a smile that was filled with relief, with joy. He leaned forward, brushing a soft kiss across her hand, the gesture full of tenderness. "I'll never regret this," he said quietly. "I promise you." Olivia's heart swelled as she sat there, her hand in his, the weight of his promise hanging between them. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. With him. And that was enough for now. The night ended with soft laughter, with the promise of a future neither of them could fully predict, but one they would walk through together. In Marcus, Olivia had found not just a man who loved her, but a partner who saw her, respected her, and believed in her. And for the first time in a long time, Olivia believed in herself too. The days that followed Marcus's heartfelt proposal were a blur of emotions for Olivia. There was an undeniable sense of peace that had settled within her, a quiet calm that seemed to push away the lingering chaos of the past. As the reality of their decision began to sink in, Olivia couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for Marcus. In a way, he had become her anchor, steadily holding her as she navigated the turbulent waters of healing and hope. It wasn't easy, of course. Every now and then, the ghosts of her past, the memories of a marriage that had shattered her confidence, the pain of betrayal and the lingering fear of being hurt again would creep up. But each time they did, Marcus was there, patiently reminding her that their love was different, that their love wasn't built on convenience or comfort, but on understanding and respect. It was one afternoon, a few weeks after their conversation, when Olivia was sitting in her studio, sketching new ideas for a design project, that Marcus walked in. His presence immediately filled the space, and for a moment, Olivia felt the weight of his gaze settle on her. "Hey you," he said softly, his voice always warm, always steady. "I was thinking we could take a trip. A weekend away, just the two of us. Somewhere quiet." Olivia looked up from her work, meeting his eyes. She could see the sincerity in his expression, the desire to give her a space to relax, to breathe. She smiled, her heart warming at the thought. The past weeks had been full of busy schedules, endless meetings, and planning their future, but there had been little time to just enjoy each other's company, to just be present. "I think that sounds perfect," Olivia replied, setting down her pencil and pushing her sketches aside. The thought of escaping the demands of the world, even for just a weekend, was exactly what they needed. The following weekend, they drove up to a secluded cabin near a quiet lake. It was a place that Marcus had found, a retreat nestled in the woods, far away from the hustle of city life. The cabin was simple, charming in its rustic elegance, and surrounded by the beauty of nature. As they arrived, the crisp autumn air filled their lungs, and Olivia felt the weight of the world slowly lift from her shoulders. They spent their days exploring the surrounding forests, hiking through the changing leaves, and simply being together. The nights were spent by the fire, wrapped in blankets, sipping wine, and sharing stories. Stories of their past, of their dreams, and their hopes for the future. It was during one of these quiet moments by the fire that Marcus finally opened up about his own past. "I've never told you much about my childhood," Marcus began, his voice soft as he gazed into the flickering flames. "I grew up in foster care, moved from home to home. It wasn't easy. People don't realize how difficult it is to feel like you never really belong anywhere. But there was one person who made a difference, an architect I met when I was 16. He saw something in me that no one else did. He took me under his wing, helped me apply to college, and taught me the value of creating spaces that heal, spaces that give people a sense of belonging." Olivia listened intently, her heart aching as she imagined the lonely child Marcus had once been. She reached over, placing her hand on his, offering silent support. "I think that's why I became an architect," Marcus continued, his voice filled with quiet emotion. "I wanted to create spaces that mattered, that had a purpose, just like the ones that man created for people who needed them most." Olivia squeezed his hand, understanding him in a way she hadn't before. It wasn't just about the buildings or the designs, it was about the meaning behind them, the lives they impacted. And in that moment, she realized that Marcus's compassion, his ability to see people for who they truly were, was what had drawn her to him. He didn't just see her as a woman to be loved. He saw her as someone with strength, someone with the power to create, to build. He saw her in a way that no one else ever had. As the evening wore on, they talked about the future. They talked about what it would mean for them to build something together, both professionally and personally. They talked about their dreams, of creating a home, of blending their passions, their careers, and their love for each other into something that was uniquely theirs. "What do you think about starting a foundation together?" Marcus asked, his voice tentative. "I mean, we both know how it feels to be overlooked, to be underestimated. We could create something that helps others, helps them find their own path just like we have." Olivia thought for a moment, the idea taking root in her heart. "I love that," she said, a smile spreading across her face. "A place where we can give back, where we can help people who feel lost, who need guidance, who need someone to believe in them." Marcus smiled, his eyes shining with the same hope that now filled her chest. "I knew you'd say that." The next few days were filled with brainstorming, ideas for the foundation that would one day help countless people. It felt right, as if everything they had been through had led them to this moment, to the beginning of something new, something that would impact the world in a positive way. They called it the Horizon Foundation, a symbol of new beginnings and endless possibilities. As the days passed, Olivia found herself growing even more confident in their relationship, in the love they shared. It wasn't just about the big moments, the grand gestures, or the proposals. It was about the small things, the everyday acts of kindness, the shared glances and gentle touches that spoke volumes. With Marcus, she knew she had found not only a partner but a true teammate, someone who would stand by her no matter what life threw their way. It was then, in the quiet moments of their time together, that Olivia realized she had truly fallen in love with him. Not because he had healed her wounds or because he had been a perfect knight in shining armor, but because he had respected her journey, respected her scars, and loved her in a way that no one ever had. As they returned from their getaway and resumed their busy lives, Olivia knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be easy. There would be challenges, there would be moments of doubt, and there would be obstacles to overcome. But with Marcus by her side, she felt ready to face anything. They had built something together, something real, something lasting, and she knew without a doubt that whatever came next, they would tackle it as a team. And so their journey continued, not in the shadows of the past, but in the light of the future they were creating, together. This story is a powerful reminder that love is not just about grand gestures or perfect moments, but about finding strength in vulnerability and building something meaningful together. It teaches us that no matter the struggles or setbacks, true partnership is about mutual respect, understanding, and the courage to start anew. Olivia and Marcus's journey shows that healing and love can go hand in hand, creating a future full of possibilities. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue bringing you more heartfelt stories that inspire and uplift.